You think Jesus can do anything right here in Las Vegas, Sin City? I believe that what God is doing is He's creating an eternal testimony. And what we know is when we can come together under a spirit of unity, nothing will be impossible. Hey, Las Vegas, welcome to Season 2 of Las Vegas United. I'm your host, Aaron Pino, and I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much for joining us right here. I mean, I'm so excited. Season 2. Season 1 was amazing. Season 2 is going to be even better. So thank you guys for joining us. And you know, here at Las Vegas United, we are partnering with God to create an eternal testimony of His goodness, mercy, and power right here in the Las Vegas Valley. We like to showcase what God is doing through amazing men and women right here in our very own backyard. And today, I have a special guest, my friend, Sean Teis. Sean, welcome to the show, man.
It's so great to be here.
Man, we're so glad to have you, man. Great to be here. I'm excited to dive in today's episode because you have a lot of things going on, man. But before we talk about what God is using you in the city for, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Where you from, wife, kids, all that good stuff, man.
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But I've always had a attachment to Las Vegas. This is where my dad grew up. And so he grew up here. He grew up fatherless. His dad died when he was 13 in Vegas. Wow. And then he married my mom. He came to Pennsylvania to just visit family, met my mom in Pennsylvania. They were married for a while. They moved back and forth between Pennsylvania and Vegas. And then eventually when I was about 10 months old, he left and came back to Vegas. And so Vegas has always been one of those places that has a weird place for me, you know what I mean? Because it's where my dad lived when I was growing up fatherless. But yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and then I went to school to be a pastor. Yeah. I thought that was going to be, just what I was going to do, be a pastor, and which would have been great. But then I graduated from Bible college, and God led me to write a book for fatherless guys, and it turned into a whole ministry. Now, my wife, she was a pastor's kid, so totally different background than me. She grew up in a pastor's home, and she was just that girl that I'm like, there's something different about her. You know what I mean? So I started chasing her when I was in 8th grade. Started chasing this girl.
Whoa, come on, man.
Yeah, she changed my life. Just being God brought her into my life and helped me. And so we have 3 kids, Malachi, Titus, and Blair, and just doing the deal here in Vegas now.
Man, that's awesome. Well, welcome to Las Vegas, man.
It's great to be here.
I know you and I sat down for coffee a couple weeks ago, and you're kind of recently a transplant out here.
Yes.
You have different family here in the Valley. I love the Teis family, friends of mine, and they were like, hey, come out to Vegas. And you told me you were like a little hesitant, right?
Yes. Yeah. At first I was like, I don't know about Vegas. My cousin Matt, he's a pastor at Liberty Baptist Church, and he presented it to us. He said, why don't you come out and partner with us, not on staff or anything, but just partner with us and do fatherless ministry here in Vegas. And at first, honestly, I was like, I don't really want to live in Vegas. And a lot of it was because that's where my dad lived, and him and I never really had that restoration moment. We never really were able to. I tried. Yeah. We talked a little bit before he died a couple years ago, but Vegas was just always a weird place for me. But it's kind of a redeeming opportunity to come here and minister to the fatherless where he grew up fatherless and where he lived when I was fatherless.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I want to hear more about your story because, the way I like to set up these interviews, I told you before, is I want people to get connected to you, hear your story, hear your background, and we tell them how God has basically used your story to launch you into the ministry and the opportunities that He's done now. But tell us a little bit about your background. I know you talked to me about your dad. It was a little bit rough. We're here in Vegas, you know what I mean? So I think people are used to the roughness of people's stories whenever they don't know Jesus, you know what I mean? But share, you okay to share some of that story?
Yeah. I'm willing to share it. My dad, like I said, he grew up without a dad, and a lot of individuals, when they grow up without a father, if they don't get Jesus Christ in their life, they don't have God as their father, as God as my dad, as our ministry is. If they don't have that, a lot of times they go after things of the world and they try to cope through sin. And so my dad became a drug addict, alcoholic, got heavily involved in the adult film industry in Vegas. He used to work in the adult film theaters. He was actually in films. And then when I met him for the first time, 15 years old, was at an adult film shop in the ghetto of Las Vegas. So like I said, Vegas was always a weird place for me. Now I have to clarify, my wife always tells me, well, there was good stuff in the front of the store, but the bad stuff was in the back. But that's what it was. His career was in the adult film industry. But to rewind a little bit, my dad, like I said, he was an alcoholic, came home one night when I was about 9 months old and kicked my mom, my brother, and my sister out. But for some reason, He wanted to keep me, the little 9-month-old baby. And so my mom was in a panic. She went over to the neighbor's house. They got the cops to show up. Cops showed up to the house. They demanded that my dad hand me over to them. And instead of gently handing me over, he took me and he threw me across the room to the cops.
Wow.
I'm glad to this day that cop could catch. You know what I mean? That cop caught me. But I started my fatherless journey around that time. That's when my dad left Pennsylvania and came back here. And so it was a struggle. And I never met him till I was 15 at that time, coming out here in Vegas. And I tried to talk to him. There was times where I forgave him when I was younger, and things would flare up. And there was times where I would talk to him and stuff. We never had that restoration relationship though.
Yeah. Wow. What was it like growing up, feeling that, knowing that story of him, like literally throwing you across the wall, basically he abandoned your family, and here you are, this kid without a dad. What was that like for you, man?
It was always weird because I was one of the only kids in my school that was growing up without a dad, that was from a divorced home or fatherless. And so it was always kind of weird. Honestly, I would forget he even existed.
Wow.
I forgot he even existed. I would think about it occasionally. It would kind of, oh yeah, there's that guy in Vegas. It was just a weird thing because I had people in my life that were pouring into me, and mentors and stuff. What happened was my dad, around the same time my dad left, right before or after, the timing's kind of sketchy on all of it. We were invited to go to church and ride on the bus to church. And it was back, big days of the bus ministry.
I love bus ministry.
And so my family rode on the bus together to church.
Wow.
My mom's cousin was the bus captain. And so we went to church, and we started riding all the time. And then my mom became the bus captain eventually. And we started driving ourselves to church eventually. I went to the Christian school. And so I was able to get plugged into a church, and through that I got several mentors. I had my grandparents, they were helping raise me and stuff like that as well. So I just had people around me that were able to help. So I honestly didn't think about the fatherless issue for a long time because my grandfather became my dad, but then he died when I was right before my 12th birthday. And it was kind of one of those times where it was like I was a mess, but then people in my church started pouring into me. And so I was blessed to have that. I was blessed to have all these people, like a youth pastor, youth leaders. And even to this day, there's this guy, Jim, that's like my dad. He's no blood relation, no marriage relation, but he started pouring into my life and helping me out.
Wow. That's awesome. I love everything about your story, right? I don't love the fact that you were abandoned by your dad, obviously, you know what I mean? But I love the fact that here you are, you have a single mom, here you are without a dad, and the thing that kind of helped bring you through was a ministry inside of a church, bus ministry. I love bus ministry.
Yeah,
I think it's incredible. I can't tell how many people I sit down with and say, we got saved because of a bus ministry, and now the legacy and the lineage after that. I mean, it's just incredible. Here you are as a result of someone's bus ministry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love the fact that there was a ministry that had a vision to reach out to you. And because of that, the Lord's plan was to interweave through it all. You gave your heart to the Lord, and then you had people come around you to pour into you, to mentor you, and to make sure that you had what you needed in regards to a father figure in your life. I think that's incredible. That's what the church is supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love that, man. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, because, I was going to ask you, like, how did you give your heart to the Lord and everything like that? You stole my questions right out of my mouth, man.
Let me clarify a little bit. I mean, I feel like I sugarcoated, the journey.
No need to sugarcoat
because
here, my friend.
Even though I did have all those people, it was still a struggle. I mean, honestly, it was still a struggle. 'Cause the thing is, when you grow up fatherless or motherless or both, a lot of times you feel like your life's off balance. We look at it with our ministry like it's a scale where mom and dad, are when you have a mom and dad in your life's in balance, like a scale. And when you don't have that caring, loving mom and dad in your life, your life's off balance. And so I had anger issues. I had feelings of inferiority because a lot of times you feel like you're inferior to the people that have a dad. They're taking them hunting. They're taking them camping. They work on their car together. They have stuff like that. When you don't have that, you're thinking, and they're talking about it at school. Like, yeah, I did this with my dad this weekend. Yeah, I didn't do anything with my dad because he lives in Vegas. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it was times of anger and so things like that I had to work through. But it was God had worked through it and brought redemption into my life through people. Like that youth pastor. He took me camping for the first time, like a dad would.
Wow.
He's talked to me about issues in my life that I needed to work through. He took me to camp in North Carolina. I went to camp, and I rededicated my life to God and made assurance of my salvation when I was right after my 7th grade year. I mean, just all these different people just pouring into my life. And the other reason I'm sitting with you right now is because of those people that God used in my life.
Incredible. Yeah. I'm just soaking it all in, man. Because you're right. You know what I mean? Like, I look at, so my dad, his parents got divorced when I think he was like either a preteen or right around where he became a teenager. And my dad talks about how, there was these things in his life that he had to work through. Mm-hmm. And so I could imagine, especially with your backstory, man, there's some things you got to work through, man. Yeah. There's some things you got to work through, that inferiority, that anger issues. I completely can see how that could be a thing in your life. And I love the analogy that you gave of the balance, because it's so true. Yeah. It is so true. Those of us who are fortunate enough to have both parents in our home, let's just be clear, like life's already hard as it is with both parents. Yeah. Because you have all these outside factors trying to come in and do whatever. And even today, my gosh, it's crazy. And so to have both, it is that balancing act. But then to have one of those weights in the scale be tipped to where things are out of balance now. Oh my goodness. I never even thought of it like that before, man. That's such a great analogy.
And we wonder why these kids are doing all this stuff. We're like, why are they committing crime? Why are they going in these different relationships or, getting involved in all this stuff? Because they're trying to cope, and that's what my dad did. My dad, like I said, drugs, alcohol, sex, all this stuff. I mean, he even robbed a store when he was 17 years old and shot at the store and became homeless in LA and all this, all this stuff, part of his story, because he didn't have a dad from 13 on that cared about him. He got involved in a sinful lifestyle and then tried to cope with that and never was able to help him. Now, my uncle was a pastor in Las Vegas. Yeah. And he grew up fatherless too. His dad, he was 10 when his dad died. My dad was 13. And he chose God. And so I love telling that story because he chose God. Now he's the pastor of Liberty Baptist Church. 45 years ago, he started this church because he chose to commit his life to God, overcome the statistics, not become a statistic, and do what God called him to do. Yeah. And so you can overcome it. If you're listening to this, you can overcome it through God. Yeah. Yeah. And you've overcome it through God. Yes. Yeah. And that's awesome. Before we move on to the ministry, I just got to know, how in the world, whenever you're 15 years old, make your way out to Vegas and meet your dad in the film store? How did that happen? It was a weird experience, to be honest with you. It was a weird place to meet your dad. I got to hear about it, man. I got to hear about it. So does our audience. My brother had moved out here, and so we wanted to come out and visit him. And he's my older brother. And so we came out to visit him, but I knew that I was going to meet my birth dad. And so I was all messed up. I mean, mixed emotions, 15 years old, you're messed up as a teenager. And so I'm trying to figure this thing out. Well, they're like, we need to go see him, and we're going to go down to where he works. And so it was a porn shop. Wow. And so it was, as a teenager, you're like, yeah, my dad's a porn star. That's what, that's what you just tell me. I mean, honestly, we would say that. I learned that's not a good thing, Right. And I knew that wasn't a good thing, but that's how we coped with it. That's how you joke about it, make jokes and stuff. Well, went down there, and I was so bitter at him. He used to beat my mom up. Wow. He used to, never paid child support, never did anything for us. I'm like, I hate this guy. I don't want anything to do, but I wanted to meet him. I wanted to find out who is this guy in Vegas. And so, I went down to the store. Now, like I said, my wife has me clarify. There was family movies in the front. It's kind of one of those things. You grab something for the kids on the way out, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of a weird setup, weird place. But so I went in there and I see this guy, and his eyes are bloodshot, and he just looked like just ruined by the world. Mm. And I thought, honestly, that feelings of bitterness and anger just kind of started melting off of me. Wow. And God had been working on me back home. I had that youth pastor, I had youth leaders, I had people in my life that were pouring into me. If I wouldn't have had that, I might have saw his life and be like, oh, wow, this is cool. He's doing all this stuff. But I saw it in a different perspective because of those people. Well, I talked to him a little bit, and I met him, and just I wanted to learn more about his life. You get curious, like what's tried to talk to him about stuff, and it was an awkward meeting. It really was. Yeah. And then I invited him over to my uncle's house, his little brother's house, and I thought, well, maybe he'll come and see me. He'll come over to supper that the next night, I think it was, or a couple nights later. And I thought he would show up, and he didn't show up. Mm. And I'm like, I flew clear across the country to see you. to meet you, and you can't even drive across town. And so I left Vegas. I'm like, forget this guy. I want nothing. Before I really didn't care, but now I'm like, forget him. He can't even drive across town to see me. So I had to work on bitterness. I honestly did. I had to I hated him.
Yeah.
I don't care about this guy at all. Forget it.
Yeah. So what was the process or the moment of you releasing him, forgiving him, and being free?
Well, I had another youth pastor came to our church. So the youth pastor I had became the senior pastor, and this guy came to our church, and he talked to me about forgiveness. He's like, you need to forgive your dad. Mm. And he saw it as a root of bitterness in me. He saw it as a thing that I needed to change. And so I'm not sure exactly. I think it was maybe a camp or something I went to, or I can't remember exactly, a retreat, something. And I was plugged into those things. And kids need to be into those events and be involved in the church because that helps them. And somewhere they talked about bitterness and forgiveness. It might have just been that youth pastor. And so I wrote him a letter, and I sent him a letter, and I said, hey, I forgive you for all this stuff you did. And I just let it go. And it was like this feeling was free. Well, then, as you have kids, with psychology, I've heard that when you hit moments that affected you as a child with your own children, it really, things flare up. You think, wow, how could they have done this? So I had my son, he was 10 months old, 10 months old. Around the same time my dad threw me to the cops and then left.
Wow.
And, those feelings of bitterness kind of flare up in you a little bit. Like, how could you do this?
Yeah.
What kind of person are you? And so I came out in 2011 for a missions conference to Vegas. Weird place to come for a missions conference, my uncle's church. And I was presenting our ministry. Our ministry had just been going for a couple of years. And so I knew I needed to go see my dad again. And I had seen him a few times, different visits. I came out to visit my brother and stuff like that. And so then I went down to another adult film shop in another ghetto side of town or whatever. And I went down, I said, hey, come on outside. I want to talk to you. We stood outside the porn shop, and I looked at him and I said, hey, I just want you to know. Well, I wanted to make sure he knew he was saved, that he had trusted in Jesus as his savior. And he said he did when he was young. Because he was involved in church and stuff like that. He grew up in church. And he said he did when he was young, but he had a lot to answer for when he got to heaven. And so I said, okay, well, that's between you and God. I said, but I just want to make sure that you know that I forgive you.
Wow.
And he looked at me and he started giving excuses like, well, I left Pennsylvania because of the snow. I'm like, what, did the child support get lost in the snow? No, I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. You got to joke about stuff. Of course. And so I didn't say that to him, but I said, I don't want to hear your excuses. I said, I just want you to know that I forgive you for all that you did. And I'm not sure how he took that. Because he was very disillusioned by his life and thinking he didn't do anything and stuff like that. I heard later before that he was mocking the letter I sent to him. He's like, I didn't do anything. He'd saying stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure I forgive him. I drove away that day. I remember driving the feeling of driving away from him, and this burden lifted off of me. Like, I forgave my dad finally. I fast forward just a couple years ago. He was sick. His seventh or eighth wife had just died. So he was really upset. I'm like, well, there's still 7 others still alive. But I didn't say that. But I said that, I understand you're struggling. I know it's hard. And I tried to encourage him. He was sick. He had COPD real bad, all this stuff. And so I went and asked him, I said, what would you tell somebody that is thinking about leaving their kids and making them fatherless? And I finally had that point where I could do that. And he said, I would tell them to consider all the things that they're going to miss out on.
Wow. And
so he finally was realizing.
Wow.
He didn't say, I don't know if there was a time he ever said I was sorry or anything like that. But for me, I took that as, hey, I'm sorry. And I also, he was going around, I was doing this ministry. I'm traveling around the country speaking about fatherlessness, and he learns about that. He's finding out. And so around that same time, he had told some family, he said, hey, Sean's making this whole ministry off of me being a lousy father. That's what he was telling people. I'm like, well, that's true. But, but I said to him, and God had been working on my heart about Joseph at that point. And I said to him that same meeting, I said, hey, I know that I've heard what you said. I said, but I want you to think about it like Joseph, where Joseph said, to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God used it for good.
That's right.
And that's the perspective. And I'm not bragging on myself. It took me a long time to get to that point, but God had me in that place. And that's where he has me. And so I was able to forgive him and let it go and look at it as, you know what? I grew up fatherless so that they can help the millions of other fatherless kids out there that need hope and need help.
Incredible. Yeah. Whenever you're talking, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher. Mm-hmm. And the line that comes to mind is God takes our misery, and if we allow him to, he'll turn it into ministry. He'll take your story, and he never wastes pain. There's actually purpose in our pain, and the fact that you've gone through what you've gone through, God has used the pain that you've gone through to now actually make it part of your purpose, part of your mission to reach other people. So let's talk about the ministry that God has you doing. And really, it's all over the nation. You're starting a branch here in Nevada. So talk to us. What is the ministry?
Well, in 2008, I started writing a book for fatherless guys called The Fatherless Journey for Guys. And so honestly, God worked on my heart about starting a ministry called Life Factors Ministries. I thought I was going to help everybody with every life issue that they were facing. That's what I thought. And so I started, one day in 2008, I started this nonprofit, came home and told my wife, hey, I formed a nonprofit ministry today. I found out that's not the way you do it. You talk to your wife about it. I was only married for, about a year and a half at the time. And so we worked, she was fully accepting of it. It was fine. But, we try to work through, what does this look like? So for several years, we were just trying to figure out what is Life Factors. And I thought, we're going to help everybody with everything. Well, God just kept on saying, focus on fatherlessness. Mm-hmm. And so we created resources for fatherless guys, one for a devotional for fatherless girls, one for single moms, a children's book for fatherless children. Wow. And then we also we have a children's book for motherless children and for orphan and foster care children. And so a lot of it was just creating resources. And then also speaking around the country and speaking on fatherlessness to train people on how to do fatherless ministry, how to relate to the fatherless, how to understand the fatherless, and how to really help them. Mm-hmm. Also training the fatherless and helping the fatherless and coaching them and helping them understand you can overcome this. You don't have to be a statistic like a lot of the people are becoming in fatherless families. And so really a lot of that, happened. Then, we think slowed down about 2012. So we did it for a couple of years and traveled around for about 16 months around the country. And then I became a youth pastor in 2012. And we did that for about 6 years. And most of my youth group was fatherless. Wow. And so I was able to work with all these kids. And during that time, I was able to, figure out different things and be able to publish some of our other books. I think our single mom book came out at that time and some other children's books. And then we created this thing in 2017 called God is My Dad. Yeah. Because for several years, we're like, how do we relate to fatherless families where they don't feel, because we would say broken homes, we would say different things. And we would think, how do we relate to them? And God gave us God is my dad. God is my dad. I'm their father. I'm their Abba father. God will take care of them, even though their dad's not there or their mom's not there. He'll help them with it. Yeah. And so we created godismydad.com 2017. We created a mobile app and website. It was in the Apple and Google Play Store, the app was. And so we ran with that for a long time. And so we used that for a while. End of 2017, God started working on my heart about leaving the church I was being youth pastor at. Mm-hmm. And so 2018, we put a bunch of plans in. We actually ended up buying an RV. And we traveled around the country for 3 years. Wow. January 2019, I think January 2nd, we went on the road. And 2019, we were in about 80 some churches, speaking 26 states, something like that. I can't remember exactly the number of everything. And just speaking anywhere we could get into a church or an event or, a youth event or whatever it might be, either spreading hope or awareness about fatherlessness. And then we did that in 2020, we started out, and then COVID hit, so we were off the road for a little bit, but went back on the road, did that for a long time, and then 2021 we did it as well. But we were looking for a place to settle down, trying to figure out where's God want us. 3 years on the road was long enough. Yeah. We hit probably 180 some churches, different events and all kinds of stuff, and God really worked. One of the main things we heard while we traveled was single moms would tell us, nobody cares about my family or nobody. I'm so glad you came here. That's what they would say. I'm so glad you came here. Nobody cares about my kids. Nobody will spend time with my kids. And so we knew God wants us to work on that. So we were presented the opportunity to come here to Vegas to start a chapter, actually to come to Vegas to do ministry. And so I prayed about it. I'm like, hey, what does this look like? I knew God wanted us to come here, but I didn't want to take, forsake my national ministry because I know God wanted me to keep that up as well. We worked so hard to partner with churches across America and build this presence. And so we prayed about it. We knew God wanted us to start making these chapters. And so Las Vegas is our first chapter. God is My Dad, Las Vegas. And what that looks like is basically a lighthouse. We come in, set up a lighthouse in Las Vegas, and we basically spread hope to single moms, to fatherless individuals, to grandparents raising grandkids. That hope is resources we have. That hope is community partners. Like we're working with Heroes United Hockey here and different ministries here in Vegas. And then that hope really is pointing them to churches that care about them. Yeah. Because that was one of the main things people had told us. They're like, the church doesn't care about me. Well, we're going to find churches that care. And so right now we're trying to set up a network of churches in Las Vegas of 20 to 30 churches across the city. I'd like to have a circle of churches. Yeah. And we just got here in December. I mean, we're working on it. Yeah. And we started a single mom group at Liberty Baptist Church. We have about 30 ladies in our network already. And every week we meet. Awesome. And so it's been great. We love to do that in churches all over the city. We have curriculum for that. We want to record the videos for that to be able to use in churches. We have, Mentoring we started up. We like to get more people involved in mentoring, working with Bible clubs. We do Bible clubs every Saturday that we partner with Liberty on. We'd like to start more of those in Vegas. Lord willing, whatever God wants us to do, we just want to reach the fatherless of this city, recruiting mentors, helping single moms, partnering with local organizations that are focusing on fatherlessness, and just directing single moms to these resources and helping them as they face these issues.
Yeah.
And we've seen tremendous things happen from, and really, we started in January, moved here in December, started in January, and up till now. And so it's been incredible. We're also launching one in Dixon, Tennessee in August.
Wow.
And so really starting these chapters, and then we're going to take them across the country. Similar to Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA, how they have chapters across America, very similar to that. I worked for FCA for a little bit back in 2010 and 2011. And so I was able to see how they operate. And they're a great ministry. They focus on athletes. We focus on fatherless families. So very similar type concept.
That's awesome. So with us coming to a close right now, if people want to get involved with what you have going on, whether it's individuals, single moms with families, or even pastors who want to be a part of what's going on right now, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you and find out more information?
A couple different options. We have lifefactors.org. For churches, people that want to help the fatherless. Lifefactors.org is our website for them. Also, you can text the number 66866, the word dad, and that'll opt you into our email list. Text dad to 66866, not 666. Okay, we're not that kind of ministry. 66866, the word dad. That's for people that want to help the fatherless. They want to get involved in ministry. At church, we have churches that want to be, it could be God is My Dad churches where they have training and resources from us. And then godismydad.com is a website for fatherless families. There's videos on there for fatherless individuals, for single moms, for grandparents raising grandkids. And that's actually the new app's going to be released in the Apple and Google Play Store, probably before this video releases. So it'll be out there, Apple and Google Play Store. And I want to encourage people to sign up. There's a free devotional on godismydad.com and get plugged into getting resources for yourself as a fatherless individual or to help the fatherless out.
Incredible. Man, Sean, thank you so much for being on today, man. There's a lot of good that you're doing. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Great. Appreciate it.
Hey, listen, I want to talk to you for a moment. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Las Vegas United. As you can see, there's a lot of resources out there for you. If you're a single parent, go to God is My Dad. If you're a church that wants to get involved, check out the website that Sean talked to us about. Listen, thank you so incredibly much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you here next week on Las Vegas United. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Hey Las Vegas, thanks for tuning in this week. Next week, Joe and Danielle Pino from Vida Church talk with Pastor Aaron about the ups and downs of planting a church. They start from the very beginning, from living lives of addiction and rebellion to being called into the kingdom despite the odds. Their testimony has graced them with a heart for reaching young people in the city and giving them a place they can call home. Our show is hosted by Pastor Aaron Pino of Overflow Church. To learn more about him and his ministry, please visit overflowchurch.co. The guest this week is Sean Teis of God is My Dad. For more information, visit godismydad.com or follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at godismydad. Las Vegas United is produced by CTN Vegas, the Las Vegas location for the Christian Television Network.